Marco Aurelius, also known as Marcus Aurelius Antoninus, was a Roman emperor who reigned from 161 until his death in 180 AD. He was not only a political leader but also a notable Stoic philosopher whose thoughts and reflections were recorded in a set of writings known as the Meditations. He was a calm and peaceful ruler, hence he became known as the last ruler of a lineage called the Five Good Emperors. For Marcus Aurelius, people cannot control external events but have control over their own perceptions and reactions to those events. Therefore, cultivating a tranquil mind involves accepting what cannot be changed and focusing on what is within our control, our attitudes, values, and judgments. For the Stoics, mental tranquility is attained through the development of virtue, the exercise of reason, and emotional detachment from things beyond our control. This doesn't mean suppressing emotions, but rather cultivating a critical awareness of how we respond to life's events. A tranquil mind allows a person to make more thoughtful and wise decisions without being dominated by impulses or negative emotions. It enables better handling of challenges, crises, and adverse situations, finding serenity even amidst chaos. Therefore, in Stoicism, the importance of a tranquil mind is directly linked to the ability to live according to the principles of virtue, acting with wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance, irrespective of external circumstances, thereby achieving a state of inner peace and emotional balance. The control of emotions, your words about controlling emotions, are based on Stoic philosophy of self-awareness, rationality, and acceptance of the natural order. By recognizing the power of our minds and choosing our responses to external events, we can achieve greater emotional control and inner tranquility. The philosophy of Stoicism that Marcus Aurelius lived by involves discipline, justice, fairness, and having great self-control. More specifically, regarding emotions, his Stoic mindset helped him overcome many deaths and adversities in his life. Following the advice of the legendary Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius, before we continue, don't forget to leave your like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any knowledge. After all, it can change our lives. Accept your fate. Marcus Aurelius says, you were formed by three parts: body, breath, and mind. Of these, the first two are under your control, the third is truly yours. According to the emperor, fate describes all the circumstances you involuntarily find yourself in. Sometimes life simply happens, it is what it is. When you accept fate, you accept the fact that you cannot control how life unfolds, no matter how much you try. Therefore, try to distance yourself from the thought that your life needs to follow a certain path for you to be truly happy or successful. Those who think this way will probably spend their entire lives unhappy because life didn't turn out exactly as they wished and probably blamed themselves for it. Instead, try to be truly honest with yourself about what you can control and what you cannot. For example, bad traffic, bad weather, or even the loss of someone close to you are things that can profoundly affect your life, but over which you have no control. When something bad happens, you can do nothing but accept it. But there are things you can control: the time you leave home, your reaction to what happens to you, your thoughts, and even your emotions. Now, it's important to understand that Marcus Aurelius didn't recommend that we do nothing and just let life take its course. We can absolutely have goals and work towards them, travel, experience new things, and celebrate our achievements. But it's important to realize that things may not go as we wish, and we need to accept this fact before we start working towards a specific goal. But how do we accept fate? Try praying differently and see what happens. Instead of asking for a way to sleep with someone, try asking for a way to stop desiring to sleep with them. Instead of a way to my child, ask for get rid of something, ask for a way not to desire its ruin. Instead of a way not to lose, a way to lose the fear of losing them. Marco Aurelius, this quote perfectly describes how to deal with fate. Whenever you wish life to follow a certain path, you are trying to control destiny and will likely end up disappointed in one way or another. However, if you try to control your emotions instead, you'll find that life becomes much lighter. In other words, when life doesn't meet your expectations, work to change your desires. So, whenever you find yourself in a situation that evokes intense emotions, try asking yourself, what can I control? Everything within your control is a reason to act. What you cannot control should be accepted, and you should consider how to act in response. For example, if you find yourself being laid off, don't curse the world for letting it happen to you, but train your mind to quickly overcome it. You can't change the fact of being laid off, but you can try to find positives in it. Maybe there's a job you've always wanted, or you could seek something with a better schedule, learn something new, or use the next few weeks as a forced vacation before returning to firing off resumes. In other words, accept the fact that you lost your job and try to positively consider your options. Now, accept your fate and seek positives or opportunities in difficulties instead of clinging to desires. We find we have great power over our emotions. How we think about things shapes how we feel about them. Thus, accepting fate helps us control our emotions. 2. Challenge your perspective. In the words of Marcus Aurelius, the happiness of your life depends on the quality of your thoughts. The best way to start accepting fate is by learning to challenge your perspective on events. Everything that happens to us triggers emotions, and these emotions make us see situations in certain ways, act in certain ways, think certain thoughts, and so on, often in destructive or unhelpful ways. To avoid this, it's important to start challenging the thoughts these emotions provoke and the thoughts they bring along. As soon as they arise, it's important to note that challenging or trying not to act based on certain emotions doesn't mean ignoring them. In other words, don't suppress, pretend not to feel, or disregard them. It's like ignoring a child seeking attention, hoping they'll calm down. Although this strategy might work with some children, it won't work with your emotions. The problem with ignoring your emotions is that, unlike a child, you can't explain your reasoning to your emotions. Most of the time, there's a reason for your emotions, and when there's a reason for something, ignoring it won't make it disappear. Emotions are often illogical, a natural response to our circumstances and the world around us. They can't be eliminated, they need to be recognized and sometimes tended to. And this is what you can control, your perspective on these emotions. But paying attention to them doesn't mean giving in to them. Instead, observe them, acknowledge their existence, and then challenge them by seeking a positive side in everything that seems negative. The Stoics were very good at forming a positive perspective on everything. A more direct guide to doing this is by asking yourself the following questions. Why does this make me feel anger, stress, frustration? What conclusions do I draw from this? Is there a more positive way to interpret this situation? Think of someone who had a fight with their partner over something significant and feels the partner is being irrational. This person might feel anger and frustration and have thoughts like, I don't think our relationship is working, or they don't understand me as well as I thought. But these conclusions only intensify anger and frustration and may even lead to sadness, making the person more upset than before. Now, what would happen if this person asked themselves the 3 questions we mentioned earlier? The first 2 have already been answered, and it's good for the person to clarify these 2. But the last question is where the most important work happens. How can they reverse this situation? Instead of thinking about the end of the relationship, think about resolving this problem together. It can strengthen the relationship. Instead of thinking that your partner simply doesn't understand you, see it as an opportunity to get to know each other better. Your partner might not understand your point of view, but you also might not understand theirs. So, think about why they said, what they might be feeling, what their reasoning might have been, and how you presented yourself to them. There might be a misunderstanding. The answers to these questions in any relationship are often much simpler than expected, and you'll find that the solution to an argument is much closer and easier than imagined. As a result, you'll understand each other better and strengthen the relationship, both very positive thoughts. Marco Aurelius has a very useful quote about trying to understand others. Whenever someone wrongs you, immediately consider what notion of good or evil led them to do so, as when you see this, you'll feel compassion instead of astonishment or anger. Thinking from the other side is a wonderful way to begin forming positive thoughts about seemingly negative interactions. If you think rationally and change your perspective on the situation and your thoughts, your emotions will follow this change. It works like this: if your thoughts are predominantly negative, you'll probably feel worse. But if you steer your thoughts towards the positive, your emotional state will improve. Every situation can be seen in various ways, and there's always a more positive or more negative way to look at it. By controlling your thoughts, you control your emotions. 3. Practice negative visualization. Marcus Aurelius advised us in the morning, tell yourself, today I'll have to deal with a curious and idle man, an ungrateful man, a slanderer, a cunning, false, or envious man, an unsocial man devoid of charity. One thing many of us have experience with is pondering worst-case scenarios. Often considering these scenarios seems destructive. It makes us anxious and panicked about a hypothetical event that likely won't happen. These possibilities arise in our minds just before giving a major presentation, before trying to sleep at night, or when we're already anxious about a concern. In response to these thoughts, we start to panic, try to push the thought away, or indulge in the accompanying anxiety. As a result, we consider these types of thoughts useless and try to avoid them. But this strategy also has its disadvantages. Now, if something bad happens, you'll be completely shaken and have no idea what to do. And this is the trick, to imagine worst-case scenarios for your benefit, to deal properly with them. Stoics call this method imagining the worst-case scenario negative visualization. Negative visualization works best when you take time to consciously do it. So, when considering doing something specific, like giving a presentation, starting a new job, selling your products, or going on a date, sit down and realistically think about the worst scenarios. Sit, close your eyes, and realistically think, what's the worst that could happen? When you start to imagine something like this, it's very likely that you'll immediately feel a wave of anxiety in your body, and you'll want to stop, panic, or maybe even cry. This is the hard part. Don't give in to these feelings. Stay still and observe your worst-case scenario as if you were a spectator. In other words, objectively face it. Now, you can start asking yourself, what could I do to handle this situation? Or how could I feel better if this happened? In other words, develop a coping strategy. When you're finished, you won't experience sudden thoughts of what if because you've already considered them. Furthermore, if the worst really happens, you won't be frozen in place. Instead, you'll know exactly what to do. So, how does this help you control your emotions? Simply put, imagine the difference between giving a presentation when you're prepared versus when you're totally unprepared. Though you might feel nervousness in both cases, in the latter case, that's definitely the situation where your emotions are more intense and more difficult to ignore. In the former scenario, you can distract yourself from nervousness and anxiety by mentally rehearsing your speech or tactics. When your mind tries to torment you with what-if scenarios, you can think about what to do in those scenarios. When your body trembles, you can find distraction by going over your speech again in your mind. Preparation is almost a remedy against emotions. They will be there for sure, but they won't dominate you. Negative visualization isn't helpful only when taking risks or trying something new. It works best as a daily practice. If you take time to consider that the day ahead might be terrible every morning, you'll face the day more prepared. Not because you're counting on a bad day, but because you'll know what to do if it happens. Marcus Aurelius especially practiced this daily version of negative visualization. It was how he spent his day. Negative visualization will help you be prepared for all possible situations, feeling more confident in everything you do, and thus being less prone to sudden emotions. 4. Use a journal. Meditate on the beauty of life. Contemplate the stars and see yourself running with them. Constantly think about the changes of the elements into each other, for such thoughts wash away the dust of earthly life. Marcus Aurelius. But of course, challenging your thoughts when they arise can be very difficult. One thing Marcus Aurelius often did to himself, which could help in practicing this, was journaling. Not to record his everyday life, but to examine his emotions and thoughts. When you write something, you're forced to give it space and think about it, reflect on it. This is a practice that therapists now often recommend and praise in psychology articles. Journaling, especially about emotions and feelings, has proven to be extremely beneficial for mental health. However, starting a new habit is more challenging than it seems. You can start writing in a journal for 10 to 20 minutes a day, for example, every night before sleeping. Don't get discouraged if you forget a day or can't do it every day of the week. The important part is doing it whenever you can, even if not as often as you'd like. One way to get used to writing about your feelings is to answer certain prompting questions. For example, what emotions did I feel today, and what events caused them? How did I act as a result? What thoughts accompanied these emotions, and do I still agree with these thoughts? Can I turn them into something more positive? All these questions require no more than a word or a phrase as an answer, although you can delve deeper if you have the energy and time. Imagine someone who experiences a certain emotion like frustration or anger and can't control it at the moment. As a result, this person shouted at their partner, who didn't deserve it. The thoughts preceding such an action can be irrational. Think about expressions like "they deserved it" or "we should break up now," or more self-deprecating ones like "I'm worthless." By writing in the evening to examine your day, you'll have to record what caused, for instance, your shout, what caused your anger, what thoughts you had next. You can see if you still agree with those thoughts or if it would be better to replace them with new, for example, more empathetic, rational, or useful beliefs.